Okay, hello and welcome, members of the Chinese Medicine Practitioner Meetup Group, hosted by Kamwo. My name is Thomas Liang. I'm the organizer and your host for this afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. I just want to take a moment to welcome new members to our group. I hope you enjoy what we have for you tonight and hopefully many more events in the future. The mission of our meetup group is to connect members with respected authorities on subject matters within our profession. The events are always free, and our speaker suggestions come from you, the members. So if you have suggestions for speakers, you can always email me and just send them to us. That's events@kamwo.com. You can reach me there. This is our 132nd event, but it's only our 10th event that is online. So for those who are big fans of live meetups, in-person meetups, hopefully it'll be Zoom at some point. However, because of the enormous reach of being on Zoom, online platforms, we'll most likely incorporate it into our in-person events, like by live streaming it. So we'll get to that at some point. By attending tonight, each of you will receive a $20 coupon via email. So please look for your email. That will be forthcoming in the next couple of days. And just look for it in your spam box if you don't find it. So anyway, tonight's talk is going to be approximately 1.5 hours. So we'll end around 8:30 or so. So here's some ground rules. Please mute your microphones and hold off any questions until our guest speaker will give us a chance. He'll give us a cue to ask the questions. And of course, there will be a time for your Q&A session toward the end. Okay. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Heidi Lovie. She's a private practitioner of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. Heidi primarily focuses on autoimmune disorders with a special interest in Hashimoto's. As a New York-based practitioner who worked through heights of the pandemic, she has also been working extensively with patients experiencing long-haul COVID symptoms. So now, without further ado, I will turn it over to our esteemed speaker, Heidi Lovie. Welcome.
Hi, it is so good to see so many faces. We're just it's just heartening to see people. And I know there's I actually have a couple people I graduated with joining us soon. So this is just fantastic. I know it makes my heart swell. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this. Now, if you guys have questions, I'm pretty good with the chat box. So rather than interrupting, just throw it in the chat box. And I'm going to be toggling between things. If anything is unclear with this, I might, if I'm going to get to the question, I'm just going to tell you we're going to put a pin in it, but I'll try and address the questions as we go on. So if you're here and you know about Sanfu, maybe you've heard about it. What I'm hoping to cover in the 90 minutes that we're together. So we're really going to look at the difference between mugwort moxa, heavenly moxa, and where Sanfu falls into this. I'm going to be going over some tried and true point structures with you guys, and then we're going to be doing some formula breakdowns, because I think that's a question that always comes up. People are constantly emailing me, what formula should I use? How should I use them? I'm going to try and get to the results of recent studies that has been put at the end of the lecture, because I really want to kind of give you guys the clinical pearls with this. So you know what you're doing in clinic, and you know how you're doing with patients, you know what to do with it. We're going to do just a mini deep dive, a middle deep dive, not a deep dive of how you actually calculate these dates, why the dates are calculated. And then we're going to look at the calculation of the 3 nines versus the Sanfu dates. Clinical gems, like I said, I'm going to give you tips how to communicate some of this to patients. Because I think one of the things, Sanfu is a type of treatment modality that can scar. And so a lot of people, because of the scarring, they step back from this and they're scared to use it as a modality in their toolbox when it's an incredible one. And I have patients all the time who are I don't care, it's fine. And we'll talk a little bit about the types of forms that you may want to have on hand and how to discuss follow-up care. So if you don't actually know what Moxibustion is, I don't know that I can help you at this point. But if we start to broaden it, the narrow definition of moxa, it's the medical application of mugwort floss on or over an acumoxa point or an affected site. And so many ways to do that, but if we actually broaden the definition and we broaden it to an external heat therapy, not just mugwort floss, but something that is thermodynamic, applied on or over a point or an affected site, we can use mugwort or other combustible materials, but suddenly, if we expand this definition, we have a whole bunch of other treatment options available to us. So, there are thermodynamic techniques that we can look at. So of course, the mugwort one. And if you guys don't know the work of Lorraine Wilcox, Wilcox, if you have not bought that book, it is very rare that I say, like, as a practitioner, you need to have this, that, or the other book on your bookshelf. Lorraine Wilcox's book on Moxibustion is a marquee book. It is a seminal work. If you have questions about Moxa, you need to start there. It's not terribly expensive, but she really did write the book on it. So we're going to break that apart from what heavenly moxibustion is, what medicinal application moxibustion is, and then medicinal poultices and plasters. All these guys kind of hang out in the same family, right? But there's different uses and different reasons for them. So, mugwort, moxibustion, many techniques, but this is limited just to IA. So we have scarring techniques, the techniques that come out of China versus Korea versus Japan versus Vietnam, are very different. In Japan, if you're an acupuncturist and you want to do mugwort moxibustion, it's a separate licensure. It is older than acupuncture. And so the history and the uses and all of that, great, but it's still a thermodynamic technique if we break it down just to kind of brass tacks. Now, heavenly moxibustion is going to be point specific, but we're actually trying to cause a blister or skin irritation. And we're going to do a breakdown here in a minute of why we would do something like that versus a medicinal application moxibustion, which is going to be something that's thermodynamic, but we're not breaking skin. There might be mild to no irritation, but we're not causing a blister with it, versus a medicinal poultice or plaster, which is region specific. And there may be possible mild irritations, but there's not going to be any blister with that. So medicinal application moxibustion, right? It refers to the application of less irritating medicinal herbs to the skin. So there's no blisters with this. And it's one of these things, I don't know if they really teach this in school so often, how to apply other herbs to points. It's really a comfortable method of treatment for children as well as adults. There's very few contraindications to this kind of thing. It's really mild, so that means that it needs to be applied more frequently, maybe once a day, maybe once every other day. This is the kind of thing where you maybe want to teach your patients how to do something like this. This is really like home therapy, but the substances will not create blisters, even if they're retained for a long time. So these photos that we're seeing are ginger. This is applied ginger, right? Using that ginger heat to stimulate the point in a way. And it's often applied before bedtime. This kind of stuff can be left on overnight, sometimes even 24 hours once it's applied. But this is gentle. Like, you can even use this with peds. Super easy. Right. And usually the medicinal substances, they're going to be raw herbs ground into a fine powder. The extracted herbs or the granules don't work. So this is the kind of thing where it has to be put through a grinder or mashed. Now, that being said, some common herbs for this type of thing kind of fall down either into like moist substances, leaves, or ground herbs. This is really what we're looking at for this non-blistering application. So if it's a moist substance, it's something that could be mashed, like the ginger that we just looked at, right? Or leaves just tend to be bruised and rolled into balls, and it could be like boha, like the mint, right? Something where we need to cool things down a little bit more, or powdered herbs, ground herbs that get mixed with liquid. And so like wujuyu is like another good herb that can stimulate and be absorbed transdermally as well. So this is one of the few times that we use single herbs as a topical application. Still not quite Sanfu, still not quite heavenly moxa, because there's really, again, unless somebody's allergic to one of these herbs or one of these substances, there's going to be very little skin damage to it. Now, versus medicinal plasters, this still all falls into the same family. So medicinal plasters are still external things applied, but they're applied to a large region. So 701, as you guys know, kind of like a clinic favorite, a standard. You can do things, you know, it's so stupid. I broke my foot recently. Like I broke my 5th metatarsal, just like snapped it. Right. And so I've been on crutches and booted and the whole 9 yards. But I've been doing external poultices on it. And I fully expect that when I go in for the next x-ray, like in a couple of weeks, they're just going to go, wait, what witchery did you do? Because these external poultices can mend bones, it can heal. But again, it's ground herbs that are being out thermodynamic. It's changing the local region metabolically. Or it could be things even like, I don't know if you guys have heard about mustard seed plasters, very common in Eastern Europe, Russia, same thing. Still falls into this realm of topicals, but it's not heavenly because it's not screwing you out, it's not blistering, right? So heavenly moxibustion has its own category of substances. And so in heavenly moxibustion, what we're doing, it's specifically the application of warm, acrid herbs to points with the intention of irritation or blistering, because what that does is it creates a constant stimulation. Kind of similar to rice grain scarring moxibustion. I don't know if you guys have seen that. I don't know if they even teach that in school anymore. But the rice grain scarring, kind of the same thing, is that you're trying to get the body, the chi, to coalesce at a certain point and behave in a specific way. So we're trying to create this burn. Now, while no fire is used, it's still considered moxa because of that heat therapy thermodynamic. And when I say blisters, I mean blisters. I don't mean like a little like, it's like, I mean, like there's going to be fluid that comes out of these things sometimes. I'm looking at Tom's face. He's about to have a coronary. All right, now, other ways to do heavenly moxa, right? So it's applied to a specific acupuncture point, right? This is not like broad source, like this is smaller, it's targeted. And these medicinals, they're often going to cause an irritation with volatile oils that are within. So this is not adding oils to it. It's the oils that are already contained in the herbs that create the irritation. So the overall effect, though, depends on the employed medicinal and the point that's used, right? And in this case, you really only choose like 1 to 3 points. And so one of the photo that we're looking at was a patient who had C. diff, and we couldn't get the herbs in her anymore. She wasn't holding anything down, and she was actually up for a fecal transplant, but I couldn't get anything into her. So what we started doing is she was a candidate for Futsa Lijiangwan, and I added a little bit of Baijietsa for irritation, and we put it in her belly button for local delivery to the gut. And it was one of the few things that actually started to turn the digestion back on. And she wound up doing the transplant, but is convinced that the kind of heavenly moxibustion that we're doing transdermally to get the herbs absorbed through the skin, which, by the way, bypasses that spleen access, right? Because we're bypassing it, we're not going to bang up the spleen, which means that we can use herbs that we would never do internally and still get a desired effect, and it's still considered safe. So the advantages of this kind of technique, it's a strong treatment. It is a strong treatment, which means like you only got to do it a couple times. Only have to do it a couple times. It does not need frequent treatment. So there's no smoke. So people that have some sort of allergy or they can't handle the moxa, patients are, believe it or not, they're less anxious because there's no fire involved. And even though they know they're going to blister, they're not scared of the burn necessarily. And the intensity of the treatment, they can control it. So if they're just like, oh, this is too much, this is too itchy, they can take it off. So they have a little bit of skin, no pun intended, but they have a little bit of skin in the game with this, and a little bit of control with the outcome too. And it's less painful than direct blistering because it'll just feel hot and itchy. And then the blister actually comes a couple days later. So it's not that the blister comes like immediately, like you burn yourself and there it is. Like it's this kind of slow buildup, because what we are doing is we're creating a chemical burn. So with the blistering though, due to the blister, once a month, like if we're not just talking Sanfu, if we're talking something else, once a month is often sufficient, because that's the time it typically takes the site to heal. It takes the burn to heal, right? And we're not doing big blisters. We're just doing like little guys. They're just like little baby blisters. So with Sanfu Moxibustion and the 3/9 Heavenly Moxibustion, now how I came across this, I'm going to refer to Lorraine again. So Lorraine wrote an article in the 2009 edition of the Journal of Chinese Medicine, where she wrote about the study, she wrote about all this stuff. And I graduated in like around 2009. And I came across the study, I was like, damn, this is good marketing. That's all I was thinking. Like, how just like terrible like capitalist is that? Like, this is good marketing. So I did it with a couple of patients and it worked. But I've been doing it since 2009 and I've messed up in ways. That's why I want to teach this, so you don't make the same mistakes I make with some of it, right? Because there are ways to do this safely. But I am consistently surprised at the results of this. So what Sanfu and the 3/9 are, is Sanfu, it's a period of about 30 to 40 days that's calculated as being the hottest time of year. So we're using specifically the Chinese medicine and Taoist calendar to calculate these days. These are not random dates. Nobody like threw a dart at a calendar, right? There's a specific logical reason behind this. And in the studies, they've studied the efficacy of Sanfu on the days that it's applied to these specific dates and other random dates of the year. And there's a statistical difference in how well this works on these dates. So the dates are as important as the application. So there are 3 Fu days, and these days are when the yang qi is pressed into or hidden or stored in the earth below. So what does this actually mean? So the 3/9, though, the counterpart to this, if the Sanfu is done in the summer, the 3/9 are 27 days calculated as the coldest days of the year that are going to be calculated against the winter solstice. And that's when the yang qi is at its weakest. So the same treatment can be used at both times of the year. Now, it just so happens that the 3/9 are really close to Christmas and everybody is out of town. So I've never been able to get everyone to do all 3 dates in winter, just because like they're moving, it's New Year's, like the whole night. Not saying you can't do it, right? But I've just found clinically and logistically, it's a little bit more difficult. But these are the best times to strengthen the yang. So we're using cosmology, and note that I don't say astrology, right? Because astrology smacks a little bit of like, oh my God, you're a Scorpio, ew. Like, that's not what this means. Cosmology is much bigger, and it's universal influences that go into the I Ching and go into things that, whether we're living on Earth, whether we're living on Pluto, whether we're living in Mars, are going to be universal. So these times are especially used to treat things like chronic lung conditions, such as asthma, bronchitis, allergies, wind attacks, chronic diarrhea, cold hands and feet. This is fantastic for long haulers, just saying, for long haul COVID, as we need to start rehabilitating both the lung tissue and the lung qi with patients. So when these symptoms are due to deficiency cold, these symptoms, they can be prevented and treated during these times. And so this treatment can be applied whether the patient is in remission or is currently experiencing an asthma attack. It doesn't matter. They could be like, you know what, I haven't had an asthma attack in 6 months. You still want to use these dates to do it, to reinforce the qi. So It said, though, that if this treatment is applied on the San Fu days for three consecutive years, the patient will be cured. Now, I have patients who've been coming in and they've been doing this with me every year for 13 years. And when they miss a year, they're just like, that's the year I got the flu. That's the year I got sick. That's the year that whatever happened. And so whether or not like you're worried about this scarring, what matters is results. I always say that, like, you know, like you can do the weirdest thing to someone, right? That's like outside their comfort zone. As long as their results, they don't care. So this is one of those things where they're just like, I don't know, whatever, give me spots on my back. It doesn't matter. So, and the treatment's very popular in China. And these days there's lines that go around the hospital, people trying to get in to get their treatment for it. Okay, so, and it's been translated, you'll see it sometimes as the 3 hidings, or sometimes it's called the dog days, just depending on what literature you're reading around it. So how are these days actually calculated? So this is kind of fun. So there's the heavenly stems and earthly branches. Now, I may be talking over some of you with this. Some of you may already know this. There's a lot of different levels of exposure to what the heavenly stems and the earthly branches actually mean. Okay, so the heavenly stems stem from yin and yang within the 5 elements. So this is our fire, earth, metal, water, wood, right? But when we expand this out into yang, fire, yang, earth, yang, metal, yin, metal, when we suddenly have 10 of these kind of vibrational forces that are universal to wherever you are on the planet. Yin fire is yin fire. I don't care if you're in Australia. I don't care if you're in Greenland. I don't care if you're in New York, like wherever. Yin fire is yin fire. So same yin earth, right? These are universal concepts. And these are universal concepts that our labeling, especially our labeling of these in English in particular, are tied to earth. But, you know, again, this is cosmology. This is heavenly. This comes from outside the planet. So these are going to be universal. If you're on Pluto, if you're on Mars, if you're on Sirius Dog Star, like these are the universals. Now, each of these, though, have a name. The name for each of these, right, is what's used in the Taoist calendar. Now, if we're going to come back to the earthly branches, that's tied to terra firma. The earthly branches are tied to earth, and it's the division of 12, how we divide everything into 12. So we have 12 organ systems, we have 12 hours divided in 2 sections, right? So, and then we have the kind of energetics, or the feeling, or the name, the nomenclature of how we name these is based after things that we only find here. You're only going to find a cow here, a sheep here, a snake here. Is this making sense? Right? And so if you have 2 cogs, one that's 10, if you have 2 wheels and one that has 10 cogs and one that has 12 cogs, and they turn against each other, the next time, if we have a fire dragon, we're not going to see another fire dragon for 60 turns. Are you guys tracking? This is making sense so far? Okay, very good. So in our heavenly stems, as we have yin, water, yin, fire, yang, fire, all these things, right? One of the things that we have is yang metal. And we have yang metal days, which is going to be different than a yin metal day. And the Chinese name for these yang metal days is gong. So we're using specifically yang metal days in the calendar as our San Fu days, right? Okay, so the San Fu theory behind this is that in the summer, qi and blood flow in the most superficial layers of the body. Suwen chapter 64 actually instructs that qi is located in the grandchild network vessels, the Sun Luo, in the summer. So things actually come up in the summer. And I was just talking with another student, sometimes, like usually around the solstice. I don't know if other practitioners do this. I can only kind of speak to what I do regarding this. but I actually changed my needle gauge after solstice. I tend to find before solstice, like as we move into solstice, if I'm using 32s or 30s, everyone starts screaming at me. They're just like, why do all the needles hurt? But if I suddenly move up to like a 34, 36, like they're quiet. This year it was kind of weird. Everyone started screaming at me about 3 weeks early. And like my needle technique hasn't changed. And so I was like, I gotta order needles earlier than I had anticipated. But that's because with the summer solstice, right, with the yang, with the heat, with summer, the qi and blood, they start coming to the upper levels, right, the upper layers. And so sometimes people I find they can be a little bit more sensitive. So Ling Shu chapter 9 actually teaches that qi is in the skin during the summer as well. So again, we're using cosmology, we're using seasonal theory to start accessing parts of the body and different levels of qi to have a very specific clinical effect. Now it's easier also, it's considered, for the body to absorb medicinal substances through the skin in summer, right? So you guys, we're tracking so far? So far, so good? Okay, very good. So the lungs and the skin belong to metal, right? So this is like one of those logic games that we play, those Chinese medicine logic games. So the lungs and the skin belong to metal. So if we use gong or yang metal days to apply treatments to the skin to treat the lungs, because we're metal, like we're so like heavy metal with this, we're metal, is that it actually enhances the efficacy of the treatment. Now, San Fu, though, it helps the dispersing function of the lungs, depending kind of on the formula that we're using. So we're going to use formulas that specifically warm yang, dispel cold, promote the circulation of qi, right? We're just using seasonal theory here is all we're doing. Transform phlegm, relieve asthma, stop cough. And so, you know, if you have patients that are falling into this kind of symptomatology, you know, you still have to do your differential diagnosis. That's what separates us from Western medicine, is differential diagnosis. If you're not doing differential diagnosis, you're not doing Chinese medicine. Just go study functional medicine, right? You still have to do your differential diagnosis with this. And if it's coming from a place of deficiency cold or cold excess, again, it's just going to kind of depend on the formula. They're a perfect candidate for it. So there's also this principle to treat winter diseases in the summer, right? If you guys actually go back and read the Huangdi Neijing, where it starts to like, you know, if you see this pulse in spring, they're dead by fall. You see this pulse in fall, they're not even going to make it to winter. Right? Like it might be hyperbole, like it might not, but it's still an instruction manual of when and how to treat certain diseases in order to get the best results. Okay, so asthma, especially when due to cold, just tends to flare up more often in the winter. That's why it's good to treat it in summer. And so during the San Fu period, yang qi is pressed into and hidden in the earth muscle layer. Are we still tracking? You guys making sense so far with this? Okay, good. So what we're doing is we're actually storing yang for later use. Now, that being said, when we talk about like clinical gems here in a second, I am gonna mention things that I've seen immediately after San Fu, right? Like just other things to keep an eye out for. But it's in 2015, I actually tried to do a study with this, right? Because that year, I think I had something like 110 people or something come through the office for the treatment. So we did I had them do surveys before, during, and like 6 months after, right? And stupid me didn't get a statistician to help me build it out, right? So the data we got back was worthless. So I can only kind of give you anecdotal data with it. But the anecdotal data that came out of it when we were doing these surveys, people were pleasantly surprised at how far they got through the year with it. Yeah, I did. I presented a couple times, like 2015, a couple other times too. Yeah. So in San Fu Moxibustion, though, so the yang of the 3 Fu days combined with the medicinal herbs is what we're using in order for future storage. So this is when we're trying to be the sage physician, heading things off, treating disease before it arrives. So, you know, and then this yang, it's injected into the body in a way as to influence the yang through the skin on metal days with the points and herbs that have an affinity for the lungs. Okay, so how to calculate this, right? This is, I don't know. I find this fun. I love this. So the San Fu calculation with this. So the initial Fu day, right? And I will give you a slide that like I'm going to, at the end of all of this, that I'm going to invite you to screenshot. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to screen, not this one, but like a specific slide, because I want to walk you through this process first. Okay, so the initial Fu day begins on the third yang metal gung day after the summer solstice. So step one, you got to find the summer solstice. So pretty easy. I mean, you can just like Wikipedia that. So the summer solstices, not that we should be leaning into Wikipedia because Wikipedia is a dumpster fire, but you guys get the point. You should be able to find the summer solstice. So summer solstices for next couple of years, June 21st, June 20th, it's usually somewhere around there. Okay, so you can pull up a Taoist calendar. These are easy to find online, right? So this just happens to be like a pretty good one that has things written in both Chinese and English on it. Super easy. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to find the summer solstice. So the summer solstice is June 21st this year. So far, so good? Okay, great. So step two is we have to find the 3 gung days after the summer solstice. Okay. Okay, so here's our summer solstice. And if you guys, I don't know like how big this is on your screens, but you're welcome to hunt and peck with me, like to look for the yang metal day. So we start looking for the first yang metal day. After this, we have to find the gung day. Did you guys find it? I know I'm like testing your foundations and fundamentals of Chinese, right? So the first, yeah, there it is. There's the metal dog day. You guys see it? So that's going to be our first. And now we have to find the next one. Okay, so we're going to hunt through and there's the next one. So far we found 2 days. Okay. So there's the Gungwu metal horse day, right? So in the San Fu calculation, the initial Fu begins on the 3rd gung day after summer solstice. So let me go back. The reason that this one, July 16th, is like, it's like highlighted for you. This is the 3rd yang metal day after the summer solstice. So this is going to be our San Fu day 1. And I'll tell you, like, as long as I've been doing this, every one of these days has been hot as hell. Every single time. It's just like, oh, it's so gross today. Is it a yang metal day? Like, I haven't started tracking like yang fire days to see if those days are gross in summer too, but every single one of these days has been hot so far. Okay, so for 2022, our first San Fu day is July 16th. Okay, so the initial Fu begins on the 3rd gung day after the summer solstice. There we go, we got it. Step 3 is we have to find the middle Fu. We have to find the next one. So the next Fu is going to be about 10 days later, because remember, these are cycles of 10. The heavenly stems are 10. So this is going to be 10 days after the first one, which means this one is it's kind of a dead giveaway. If you just count out 10 days, it'll pop up on the calendar. So second day is going to be July 26th. I hope you guys are finding this fun. I find this a riot. I don't know. I like Sudoku too, so maybe that's why I find this fun. So there's the second one. Okay, step 4 is we have to find the final Fu. No, this is the rule breaker. The final Fu is not 10 days later. So the final Fu is on the first day after autumn begins in the Taoist calendar. So you have to go do a little bit of reconnaissance to find when that date hits. And so again, I don't want to get into too much like solar terms, cosmology, blah, 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 but it's one of the 24 solar terms, one of the 24 solar nodes. that you need to go look up. And there's plenty of sources for that. So you go look up the Li Chuot Day. And so that just happens to be this year, when I looked it up, it was August 7th. So we have to find the first Gung Day after that. And then we have a Metal Rat Day on the 15th. Okay, so 2022, no, don't take a picture of this yet, because we're not done. We're not done, okay? So we have our initial Fu, our middle Fu, and our final Fu. But sometimes we get an extra Gung Day. Like if you've seen this, some days we have three San Fu days, and some days we have 4. So the reason that there's a difference between the 3 and the 4 is sometimes there's another day, there's another Yang Metal Day that shows up after the middle, but before autumn. Okay, so step 5 is we have to go check for this extra guy. If we have like a little secret guy hiding in there. So we have to check for the extra Fu. So here's our first day. Like we said, July 16th. Our second day is July 26th. Now we're gonna start to hunt and peck in the blue, right? And if we look in the blue, we have a metal, but that's yin metal. That's not yang metal. So we have to look for the yang metal. We have a water, we've got wood. Okay, wood rooster, cool. All right, there's my water dragon day, right? So there's my start of fall. So I got to look in this first week, and I start looking, and there we go. We got a metal tiger day. So we happen to have 4 days this year. Now, this is what it looks like. So now we have 4 days. This is what so if you guys want to take a screenshot of this. This is the screenshot of how to calculate what we just went through. And if you guys are on a computer, you know it's Shift Control 4, right? I'm just saying, I don't know, like I'm just saying as a professional student, you can just do Shift Control 4 and do a window shot, but you didn't hear that from me. So do your screenshot of this. I also put this up on my website. So if you guys lose that screenshot, you can find it at a later date, but this is how we calculate it. So I just went ahead and I calculated the next 3 years for you guys. You guys can take a screenshot of this as well if you need to. So this is 2022, 23, 24. So next year we only get 3 days, right? Which I don't know, it's kind of a bummer. Like I've been doing like 4 days for so long, I've kind of got used to that. But there's the dates. All right, and so it said actually that the best time to apply the plasters, to apply the topicals, is at noon on a sunny day. So yeah, okay, it may not be as effective if applied when it's cloudy. Like take that with a grain of salt. I don't think you're going to shut down your clinic because like the Yang Metal Rat Day was cloudy. Like you're still going to do it, right? But you're just not maybe going to have like as high as expectations. Now the 3 9s are also days based on the Chinese calendar, but these are way easier. These are much easier to calculate. So rather than like necessary cosmology, this is based on numerology. So in the numerology with this, it's in the numerology of the magic square of 9s, like that specific yang number that we talk about. So these are calculated to be the coldest time of the year when the yang qi is at the minimum and the yin qi has kind of reached its apex. And so San Fu, they run on the same theory with the San Fu is performed in the summer and the 3 9s happen to be when yang qi is in decline in the winter. So when we start looking at summer solstice and the movement of the earth and the axis, and we can start seeing sunlight and shadow and like how it moves, we're trying to catch these points, these pivots in the calendar. And again, like use it to our advantage because it's just a sine wave. I mean, I don't mean to be reductive with this at all. This is an incredibly complex, like beautiful theory that like we're all going to be studying for the rest of our lives. So I'm not being reductive with this at all, but we're trying to catch specific points in the sine wave to use at our advantage when things are either cresting or falling. So the 3 days begin with the winter solstice, as logic dictates. And so the middle 9 is 9 days later. So it's 9 days after winter solstice, 9 days later, and then 9 days later, 18 days after the winter solstice. So initial 9 is winter solstice, next is 9 plus 9. So there we go. Winter solstice for the next 3 years is December 21st. Doesn't shift too far off the Gregorian calendar with that. And then you just calculate 9 days out. So can you see why this is a little difficult? Right? Because everyone's like in Bermuda or like with their parents or like in Nebraska. I don't know where people go for winter holidays anymore. Yeah, and if you guys wind up doing the 3 9s and you have experience, like remember to reach out to me and tell me what your experience with it is like. I'd love to know. I'd love to know because it's a good time in the calendar to give it a try. Okay, so let's actually talk about the treatment. Let's just talk brass tacks because I think this is why you guys actually showed up. So the treatment with this is, now there are going to be more studies for Sanfu than for the 3 9s in terms of the efficacy. And the studies with the Sanfu, they used points specifically located on the upper back, chest, and shoe points on the lower back. So clinically, though, it's best actually to choose points based on pattern differentiation. So the points that we're going to discuss tonight, the ones that we're going to talk about and the ones that I presented and the ones that I've done year on year are a little boilerplate. And that's not to say that you can't add points to this. I highly encourage you to add points to this. So if somebody is more, spleen chi deficient, like think about doing Sanfu on spleen points, think about doing on stomach, think about doing on Yang Ming, right? Because Yang Ming points are rich in qi and blood. So think about doing this. We're using mostly Taiyang points, but like there's no reason that you couldn't use Shaoyang for this kind of stuff. Okay. So it's usually this is point structures that have been studied, and these just happen to be the ones that I like, but really like you have permission to go rogue on this. So the first set on the first Fu day, Ding Chuan, UB12 and UB13. So these are all in the upper back. They're easy to get to. And these points specifically diffuse the lungs and they call them panting. Pretty easy to access. On the first day too, I've had patients that have actually come in and they've requested things like Ren 17, Sanjiao 4, stomach 36, and so there have been studies with Ren 17 as well. It's a great point to use and it's easy to get to. Now you're not going to go back on your second Fu day and just be like, okay, like I did Ren 17 Fu day 1, I'm going to do it Fu day 2. No, don't. Like you've already you've put the stores in, right? You've stocked the stores in Ren 17. Like that door is closed. Go to a separate point structure. So the next point structure that has been studied and that I like is going to be Do 14, UB14, and UB20. More middle back, right? Because this is about fortifying spleen and transforming phlegm. One of the things that I've seen clinically that's interesting about this is you use the same formula, you use the same points, use the same application, use the same date, use the same everything. And the only place they blister is UB20. And they'll get like honking blisters. And it's just like, yeah, you're spleen chi deficient, that tracks. So you can actually use this a little bit diagnostically as well. And you can start to think about, well, what points are going to pop and what points might not pop. Third Fu day, and if you guys want to take a picture of this, you can take a picture of this as well. UB11, UB23, and UB43, Zhang Jing's favorite point. Right? If I could only take like a handful of points to a desert island, UB43 would be right up there, Gao Huangshu. So, but this set, the 11, the 23, and 43, supplements the kidneys to absorb qi. Now we're using things along the Du, which is the Sea of Yang, and we're using things along the Taiyang with that specific extraordinary set Ding Chuan, which specifically both effects and affects the lungs. So you can see how this is it's a pretty good point structure, right? One of these things, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I like this point structure. And by the time they're done, like they have these kind of like nice little dots that go all the way down their back, like in the fall. Now, the treatment, like in some hospitals, some places, they might actually warm it up by doing ginger moxa first. If you have the time, you can do that, right? Generally, when I do this in the office, I have people in and out in 15 minutes. So I'm not warming up the point with ginger moxa, but you can do it, right? Where you could either take ganjiang and soak it in water so it reconstitutes and put that over a point and put moxa directly on it, or you can just bring in fresh ginger. Just bring in shengjiang and like put it right on the point, burn it, and then make the application. Again, it just depends on how much time you have with your patients. And sometimes the medicinal paste is heated before or during application. Okay, fair. So the procedure, it's pretty straightforward. So you're going to diagnose and choose your appropriate points, whether it's the ones I kind of gave you or you're doing more differential diagnosis. And then you're going to have the patient come in on the San Fu days, preferably around noon. I don't know, it's whenever you can get them in, really. Optional, apply the ginger Moxibustion first, and then you apply your San Fu Moxibustion plaster after that. Now, the paste is made, and then you can put the paste on adhesive tape applied to the selected points. And then the paste, once it's on there, you want to leave it on for up to 6 hours or until the sensation of heat and itching where they can't stand it anymore, whichever comes first. And then you want to make sure that it's just removed and then the site is washed off. I've had patients forget it was on there and sleep with it. I've learned the hard way, more is not better. Like those are some like honking blisters where it's just like, yeah, that's a chemical burn we didn't want to do. So when patients leave, I'm like, okay, so you like, Dr. Holmes, you came in at 2 o'clock. You are taking this off at 8 o'clock. Do I need to give you a reminder? Like, be very clear with it, and we're going to talk about tricks and trades tips with it, right? And so one of the tips, you can actually use your EMR to your advantage with this, but yes, have them put like a reminder in the phone to take it off. You don't want them forgetting that, because like once they get past the itching stage, like they'll kind of forget it's there, but it doesn't mean it's still not creating an effect. So there will be an irritation or a blister will occur. And it's important to note what people are getting into. Now, whether or not they scar, it's going to depend on genetics. It's going to depend on melanin content of the skin. So black and brown skin is going to look different than skin that's of like lighter hues, right? What kind of medication they're on, their current health status, like, are they diabetic? Like, do they have comorbidities? So I've seen kind of like everything. I've seen people come back like no scars whatsoever. Or I've seen like pretty severe scars where I'm like, yeah, didn't we do that like 3-4 years ago? And they're like, yeah, but I haven't used an inhaler for 3-4 years. So it's one of these things where I encourage you guys to get pictures from patients. If you're doing this, share pictures so people know what they're getting into. Because one of this is within scope of practice. Because it's within scope of practice, yes, like malpractice insurance, right, will cover what's in scope of practice, right? But people still need to know what they're getting into before they come in. But like I said, like I've had like over 100 people come in the office and every single one of them knew what they're getting into. Okay. So the formulas. Now, these two major formulas that I'm going to discuss with you guys, these are just the ones that like I use. Like I want to do a breakdown with you though, because I start getting questions like all the time. So these are the two basic formulas. And it's important to understand how these guys work, right? So you can make a smart decision with your people, because everyone's like, oh my God, I'm so deficient. Just give me the kidney and lung deficiency. And it's like, yeah, maybe, maybe not. Not everybody needs that. You'd be surprised at how many people actually need the excess formula. So let's look at the excess formula first, because again, like the assumption is, especially in the West, is that we lean towards deficiency in certain cases. So with this formula in particular, the treatment principle is to warm and transform cold phlegm, descend rebellious qi, and stop cough. That's the specific treatment principle for this formula. So it's best used for people who have internal cold phlegm trapped in the lungs. And these are people where the symptoms tend to recur every winter and often. And so other things you're going to look for shortness of breath, a tightness in the chest. You're going to look for wheezing or repeated attacks of a kind of a semi-productive cough, because this is about phlegm that's just like goopy and sticky in the lungs, but they're not able to necessarily like expectorate. And there will often be like either scanty or tenacious mucus or thin watery mucus. Now, last year, I worked through the pandemic, and we closed like March here in New York, closed March 13th. And then I think we were essential workers May 30th or something like that. I don't remember. But I worked straight through the pandemic, and I started seeing long COVID in June. We just didn't even know it was long COVID. We didn't have a word for it yet. Right. But one of the things that we're seeing, like, and you still see it, stasis in the lungs, this hard recalcitrant, non-moving stasis, like in the organs, where with time, because like there's that transmutation between hot and cold, right? It might be transmuting between the two. So you're going to want to try and catch it more when it's cold. But this is for it where it's just like they're like sticky and goopy and gross, and there's both stagnation, stasis, and phlegm. So you're going to look for a pale and swollen tongue, maybe with tooth marks, accompanied by moist, greasy white coat with this. You want to see that kind of chunky monkey coat. And then the confirmation will be a soft and slippery pulse, right? Because we're looking for that phlegm damp. Now, this one has Yanuswo Shishin Mahuang Gan Sui. We're going to love that Gan Sui, and Bai Jieza. So when we do the breakdown of this, right now, the Yan Hu Suo in this formula, it comes from that invigorate blood category. And this one specifically, it's liver, stomach, lung, spleen, but it stops pain. But this Yan Hu Suo promotes the movement of qi within the blood. So it kind of starts to kickstart, like restart some of this. The Shishin, it's one of these warm, acrid herbs, and it's that slightly bitter warm. Now, this exerts most of its effects on the upper body. And so it's going to act as a guiding herb, like up to the lungs in that area. And it directs other herbs to the heart and kidney, especially in the arms and the chest. So we want this chest action, right? And then because it disperses specifically when cold and internal cold, but it warms the lungs. So we're trying to get warmth and warm qi and yang back into the lungs, specifically with the Shishin. And then the Mahuang, we all know Mahuang, yes, it induces sweating. It has that affinity with the UV channel, right? Like that's an NCCOM question. But it's that warm, acrid herb that releases the exterior as well. So, whenever we have phlegm, damp, and this is going to be so crass, and I'm so sorry what I'm about to say, but this is the only way that I ever remember it. With damp, you can shit it, piss it, sweat it, vomit it. That's how I remember it. Now, we don't make people vomit so much, right? I mean, maybe some practitioners do. Like I haven't made anyone vomit in a while. We can drive things through the bowels, not the nicest, but it'll work, right? We can induce the movement of these fluids through the urine, or we can use the lung to help them sweat it out, right? And so Ma Huang, it induces sweating and it releases the exterior. So it starts to open up the paths for whatever this recalcitrant phlegm damp stasis is, for it to go somewhere. So, and it calms wheezing, stops coughing, because it starts to calm the lungs. And again, like we're doing this through the skin, so it's pretty safe. Now, Gan Sui is one of these. Do they still give you guys like herbal samples for herbs class? Did they stop doing? I don't know. Like when I was a student, we used to get bags of herb samples for every single herb we would study. And I swear to God, they included Gan Sui and a couple others in there. And it might have been Tom. I don't remember who said it, but they're just like careful with it because it'll like hurt a toddler or kill a chihuahua. So it's one of these like herbs where like you don't want to mess with it. And one of the first years that I was So stupid. Like, I don't know, like you have to share your failures and your successes, right? None of the blame, none of the glory. But one of the years, like one of the first years, I was doing San Fu, and I had my herbs and I was grinding them down, and I didn't have a mask or gloves on, and I had like my iced coffee. It was so unhygienic. The whole thing was just so stupid. It was like the worst thing you could have done. And I had the San Fu powder on my hand, and I went like this. And then I went, uh-oh. Because it took a minute. It's just like my stomach doesn't, I barely made it to the bathroom. I was like, yep, there's the harsh expellant, right? It's a harsh expellant. You don't want it to come in contact with mucosal surfaces. But because we are using this externally, and we are using this with other herbs, it's okay to do. Because even though usually this violently cathartic herb when taken internally, because it drains water and constipation through the rectum, right? You can still use it as a base for moxa on the umbilicus. We can still use it externally in other ways, but it's going to drain things, but it disperses hardenings. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to break up whatever is sitting in the lungs with this, and we're trying to move the fluid as well. Now the Baijiatsa, right? So do you guys remember what Baijiatsa is? Just from a Western standpoint? Mustard seed, exactly. And remember how we talked about mustard seed packs? Same exact thing. So it's the Baijiatsa that's the chemical irritant in this. This is the volatile oil. And so when this is ground, this is what's starting to cause the skin irritation. And when we have that wound, that skin irritation wound, it enhances the body's ability to absorb the other herbs. But it's specifically the Baijiatsa that does this, right? You know, and it's excellently, and it's great, like at getting phlegm in the subcostal region, in addition to the area between the skin and the membranes, that's Li that we talk about. Now the deficiency, but can you guys see why this is such an awesome formula? Where like, yes, like it's excess, but it's excess like that recalcitrant, like moving, that's not moving. Yeah, and Tom is like, I got stories for Baijiatsa. I'm sure you do. I'm sure there's like some horror stories with it. Like it's one where we consider it simple, but it's not so simple. Okay, so let's look at the deficiency formula. So most of the herbs in this formula, they're going to be acrid and warm. And the treatment principle here is to nourish the lungs, soothe asthma, and reinforce the kidneys to be able to grasp the qi, to grasp the lung qi. So we're going to look for things such as an aversion to wind, shortness of breath, difficulty on the inhale, asthma. We're going to look for people that just like spontaneous perspiration, cold limbs. There's going to be maybe a history of upper respiratory tract infection and a less productive cough because they don't have the qi to move it necessarily. Even if there's something there, that's the deficiency part. So you're going to be looking for, again, a pale, moist, and swollen tongue. The tongue coat is not going to be as thick as what you're looking for in the use with the other formula. And you're going to expect the pulse to be deep. You're going to have to chase the pulse to find it, right? Because it's that kidney piece to it that we're going to try and bring up closer to the surface where we have more access to the kidney qi. So it's a little bit like, it's a bigger formula. And you can see we have yin yang huo, shan yao, huang qi, huang qing, chuan qiang, buguzhi, ban xia, and ban xia fa, and the Baijiatsa again here. So the yin yang huo, right, it's acrid but sweet versus, remember where the other like herbs were a little bit bitter. So this one, it tonifies the kidneys, it strengthens yang, it warms and unblocks the flow and channels. But this also tonifies the Du and the Yin Chao channels. So this herb specifically actually starts going into the extraordinaries. Now, Shan Yao, again, we have another tonified qi formula here, and we're going after the spleen. Now note in the other formula, we didn't go after the spleen necessarily. We're just trying to clear out the excess damp and phlegm, where this, it's going to be tonifying the qi. So any sort of phlegm damp is going to be taken care of once the spleen is brought back online. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. You know, because when there's spleen issues, right? We can have spleen issues either because the spleen has been overwhelmed, like you went to one too many McDonald's and it's just like, I'm done. Like, I'm good. Like, no, we're not doing this. No way. It can be that the spleen is actually, so the spleen's just like overloaded in that case. The spleen chi is fine. It's just been, there's too much for it to do, right? Or the spleen just gets kind of tired and it needs to be woken up. And in that wake up, that's just kind of like, knock, knock, Putin head, let's go. Those are going to be the aromatics. Or we're actually going to go just like straight to the source and try and like strengthen the spleen chi directly. Right, you can see, yes, this nourishes stomach yin, but it also tonifies that tai yin with the lung qi and the lung yin. So the shan yao here is a pretty heavy hitter in this. It's a pretty heavy hitter. And it's still like kind of technically neutral, right? So we get both the correction of yin and yang with this. Now there's the huang qi too, tonifies qi and blood, raises yang qi of the spleen and stomach. And this goes directly for the wei qi as well. So this is working at different types of qi and different levels, generates body fluids, and it promotes other herbs. So this is the overall kind of tonic in a way. Whereas like the Huangqing, right? Again, spleen, spleen, right? So the Huangqing and the Shanyao are both sweet and they tonify qi, they're nourish yin. So what we're talking about too, right, is another way to think about yin and yang from a medical standpoint. You know, like yin and yin deficiency, like, so yin speaks to how pliable is an organ. How juicy is that organ? Would you want to eat that organ? Right? So if you look at like some dried up nasty kidneys, you're not going to want those kidneys. Those are yin deficient kidneys, right? There's no pliability there. There's no substance to it to actually hold the byproduct of the yang with the metabolic factor to that, right? So with this one, part of this is also rehabilitating yin and rehabilitating the pliability of the organ. And you need pliable lungs to be able to inflate and deflate, right? So this one, it's an incredibly important one because we do get lung and kidney with it, or kidney and spleen in addition. Now the chuan qiang is going to invigorate the blood. And so this is going to expel wind, alleviate pain, but we're using the promotion of the movement of qi function with this one, right? So we're not just saying qi, 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 like we got to give the qi something to root in. And so we're giving homage to the blood as well. And then we have the banxia to transform the phlegm, marquee herb for treating that. And then last one is the baijiazi, which we looked at before, same thing here, right? So this is all about like creating that chemical reaction. All right, now I gave you guys the formulas with this. If you choose to make your own form, which I encourage, and you can get and Lorraine Wilcox in her book, she has other formulas you can look at. So I'm going to encourage you as herbalists, not just, you know, these are two products, these are two over the shelves, these are whatever, these are great, right? But you can also make your own. That's why I gave you the formulas that were in this, okay? The kicker though, is if you get your own, you can go to Kamwo, you can go to a dispensary, put the formula in, ask them to grind it. You're gonna have to ask for a fine grind, as fine as they can do. And when you get it back, you're gonna have to put it through a sifter. You will be surprised at how much plant fiber and material still comes out. If you try and do the san fu without putting it through a sifter, when you roll the balls, it's going to look like horse poop. It's going to be chunky and there's going to be plant fiber in there and it's not going to work as well. So you got to go like into your like grandma's baking cabinet and find one of these like old sifters, go to a garage sale and get one for $2 and put it through the sifter. Otherwise, it's just not going to work as well if you don't do it. Now, the packets that we were looking through, those have all gone through a sifter, but again, this is one of those like clinical things that nobody teaches you until somebody tells you, right? Is that it has to go through a sifter. So what you're going to do is ginger juice is you want to mix this with ginger juice. You don't want to mix, like if you mix it with water, it's just not going to work as well. I've tried mixing this stuff with just about like everything. Like it's got to be the ginger juice. And so generally you can do it by peeling several slices of ginger. You can grate them. You can wrap the gratings in cheesecloth. You can squeeze the juice out. You can put it through a garlic press to get the juice if you want to. And if the ginger is fresh, that works really well. If the ginger is a little old, it's not going to work as well, but just put it through a garlic press if you want to. You know, you can peel and chop and put it in a blender with water and then strain it out. But if you do the fresh ginger through the garlic press, that seems to work best. So you're going to take your powder, you're going to take your ginger juice, and you are going to very slowly add the ginger juice. If you add too much ginger juice too quick, it will look like sloppy beans. You're going to try and very slow, like literally like drop by drop by drop by drop, you add the ginger juice until it starts to look like Play-Doh or a paste. And it'll be sticky, like it'll be sticky enough to make a ball where you can hold it. It's not a problem. And then you can actually just roll it. So you're going to roll the paste into a ball about the size of an eraser head. So you guys tracking with this so far, right? And it'll stick to itself. And now that one with the Gone Sway, you can use gloves or not, just as long as you're not touching your face and you're washing your hands after application, it's fine. Some people prefer to use the gloves when doing it, but whatever. So you just want to be able to roll into a ball. Now there's different ways of doing this. This is the way that Lorraine does this. And the way that Lorraine does it, it's going to create a smaller irritation, and it's going to create a smaller wound. So what you can do is you just take a piece of medical tape, and with the medical tape, you just cut a hole about the size of the point. Does this make sense? You know, I actually at one point, like I got a hole puncher and I was like doing hearts and stuff. Like it didn't work as well. Like that's not what the blisters came out of. Like I wanted like little like hearts on food and it just didn't work. Like if you're going to do it, this works better. So just cut a hole about the size of the point, and then you put the tape on the point, and you put the herbal paste on top of the hole to cover the hole. Does this make sense? So now you can really control like the size of the irritation and the size of the blister that you're gonna do. And so then you can just cover the paste with more medical tape and retain for about 6 hours. Easy peasy. And if you're doing a lot of people, you're gonna want to pre-cut this. So you go in, maybe, I don't know, like maybe like a half hour early, you pre-cut like a lot of like the pieces of tape with a hole in it. You just like stick it along your table, pull, like tape, pull, tape, pull, tape, pull, like almost assembly line, right? You just apply your chosen point. And then when they're ready, they wash the point off after removing the herbs. And so there may be some redness, right? It may look a little irritated, but then even after it's off, the irritation, it's going to continue to develop. And so this is a picture of one where the blister formed 2 days later. Didn't happen out of the gate. It took about 2 days for it to pop up. This is 3 days later with the blister after the fluid came out. And then this was about 10 days later with this person. Now, again, color and markings, melanin level, it just really, really, really depends on your skin type, your age, like all of that, right? So this is just what it happened to look like on the photos that I have, like this patient who sent me photos. Now, follow-up care, you have to be very clear with the follow-up care with this. So, you know, you're going to remove the Sanfu application 6 hours or whenever they start to become itchy, whatever comes first. Wash the skin with soap and water and then just pat it dry and just leave it. Because remember, it's going to take a couple days for any of this irritation to show up. And then if blisters appear, you're just going to treat it like you would any normal blister. Doesn't need any like magic special treatment. You want to keep the area clean once the fluid comes out, and you don't want to remove that top layer. Now, if you want to treat it with something like Neosporin, totally fine. Neosporin's pretty neutral. You don't want to be putting things like burn cream on it. You don't want to be putting things that are going to cool it down. You want to be putting things on it that are going to be like a little bit neutral, and just keep it covered with a Band-Aid, and it'll heal pretty quickly. And so like I tell people, like Neosporin or whatever neutral topical cream they want that works for them and their skin type. And then if there are scars and if they're worried about the scars, you can do things like wheat germ oil, tamanu, the Mederma scar gel oil. Those all help to lighten the color of things, and the color of it will just continue to get lighter with time for most people, right? You never want to make claims that, you never want to write a check that your ass can't cash, right? So you want to be like careful with what you're saying with some of this. But you do want to give them like the stuff. So the cautions and contraindications when we would or wouldn't do this. So it's not appropriate for children under 2. Yes, you can do it in children. I have kids come in and we do this all the time with kids, but not under 2 or pregnant women. Because have you ever put your hands on a pregnant woman? You know how hot they are? They are all yang because they're gestating. You want to add more yang to that? Like they'll burst into flames. Like just tell them come back and do this in a year. Like just don't make them miserable. Don't do that to a pregnant woman in July. It's just mean. People with serious skin allergies, like people who tend to have outsized skin reactions to contact dermatitis, you want to be careful with it. So my suggestion, if you have a 4-fu year, just do one application on one point and see how they react before you go hog wild with the other points and other locations. Diabetics, and that just has to do with wound healing. So if the diabetes is like well under control, great. Go at it. If the diabetes is not under control, it's borderline, I say just don't do it. Don't do it because the wound healing is going to be hard. Or people who have like a hot disease with a high fever, sore throat, just make them wait. Right. So if they have the flu or they have COVID or like anything, if they're in the recovery, it's fine. But if they're an active viral, like you don't want to do it. So on the day of the treatment, I tell people like, avoid cold foods, spicy hot foods, alcohol. I have had people that they went drinking after their sun food treatment and they came back and they were like, that was a mistake. It just like brought the san fu and the heat to another level. So don't do it. So, and so it can be used on children over 2, but with shorter treatment, right? So when we do peds in the office, I just usually say like, hey, you can bring in the kid. I'll do it on the kid, but I will be removing it in 20 minutes. So stay in the office. Here's a coloring book, right? Like, let me keep an eye on them. And I just have them hang out for the duration and then I remove it. Right. And so it's a much, because kids are young. Right. And so generally with the kids, you're going to be leaning into that excess formula more than you are the deficiency formula, but it's a very like short retention time. Okay. So some clinical gems that I want to give you guys that I've just learned with time to make your life easier. Do you know what Tegaderm is? Some of you do, some of you don't. So if you ever go to the hospital and they put an IV in you, or you have like a chemo port, they're going to put a piece of plastic over it to hold the port or the IV in place. So it's waterproof, like, sorry, the dog. So it's waterproof. It's really hard to move. And for the most part, it's pretty hypoallergenic, right? And so, like I told you, like these days, they tend to be really hot. And I've like applied stuff and had people come back an hour later to be like, I sweat the medical tape off. Can you reapply? So I've tried the medical tape. I've tried the, how they have like the Nexterm tape that's supposed to be like waterproof. I've tried that. I've tried Band-Aid. I've tried like literally, like you name it, I've tried it at some point, right? The Tegaderm though, the people, they're not going to sweat it off. It's going to stay on. And I found with some of the applications, the herbs actually leak through the material. So I've had people like stain their clothes. It's not going to do that with Tegaderm. Now the downside to Tegaderm, it's a little bit It's a little bit expensive. Not prohibitively expensive, but it is a little bit expensive if you are seeing a lot of people. So just make sure that you're charging appropriately to cover the cost of it. But it's really like, it's the best thing I found out there in the West anyways, for these kind of applications. If you're seeing a lot of people, purchase the ginger juice. Go to a juice bar. I know it's a cheat. I know it's a cheat. Just don't get the juice with a cayenne pepper in it. I did that one year accidentally. It was terrible. Don't do that. So you want to make sure, like, you know, you can get fresh pressed juice like on the way to the office if you don't have the time. Again, just depends on how busy you are. Then whatever you're not using, right, freeze for the next time. Don't throw it out, just put it in the freezer. And I actually like, I don't know if you guys know Melanie Caton, like Melanie has been doing this for years, and Melanie just used to keep frozen ginger juice in the freezer in the office because she was like, I don't care about something, like I'll do it whenever because it works, right? So you just keep, like, she had like ice cube trays of it. So just freeze the ginger juice. And then, you know, if you're doing a lot, just like you can roll extra San Fu balls and put like in a little sealed container. So on the days that I do this, I go in and I'll roll like 100 of these things. So I have them there, and then you can just literally like spritz them to keep them moist and keep applying them. So I always remind patients to wear clothes, like wear appropriate clothes. So if we're doing like top clothes, like can I move around like a tank top? I know that sounds ridiculous, but like, you know, if they come in like in a skin tight top and they're having like, it's just, I don't know, remind them to wear appropriate clothes. EMR with this is going to be your best friend. And EMR will absolutely be your best friend. So if you use an EMR, have it automatically send a follow-up note. So I'm going to actually show you guys what I do with my EMR. So I use JNAP, and this is what I have set up in the EMR for people. I have two things. So one, I have the follow-up care set in their chart. And so this goes into the chart, like as soon as they leave, they get an email that I shared this document with them. So it's charted that I shared the document with them, and it's charted whether or not they open the document. And it has all the instructions that I gave you guys exactly. So you want to make sure, and if you don't use an EMR, give them a paper copy of the follow-up care instructions. But put this in the chart to make sure it's been charted. And then how I chart it, just set up like a really basic template for yourself right now. So JNAP has these templates, right? So I can say what formula was applied, allergic asthma, we did day 1. Okay, cool. I did Ren 17, pulse notes, tongue notes. What I have here though, is I'll take a picture of the tongue each day and I put it in the chart to see how the tongue is charting. I have all the classic pulse notes. So as I'm taking the pulse real fast, like I'm able just to click what pulse is there, and then any quick additional notes before they go. Right. And so now every time they come in, I'm just using like the same template. But like, again, if you're seeing a lot of people, or even if you're not seeing a lot of people, it's good to have this template, and it's good to have tongue pictures during the period that they're doing the San Fu, so you can see how it's shifting the systems. Again, this is just a clinical pro, like I think you guys should do. Chart. I just showed you chart everything, because if you're causing blisters and somebody gets pissed, right, you need to chart that, like, you had the conversation with them. It wasn't a surprise that the follow-up information was in there. And the other thing that I'll put pictures in too is sometimes I'll put pictures like at San Fu day 2, I'll take pictures of San Fu day 1 and I'll put them in there as well. So you got to chart, like I cannot, this is one place that everyone falls down after like they graduate, you become lazy charters. Do not be lazy with the San Fu charting, just chart. Right. And I already told you follow-up care instructions. All right, we can go into current studies, but I don't know, like I'll just send you guys something kind of afterwards, or I'll post it on my website so you can look at it, because I want to hear any other questions you may have. I've been kind of monitoring the chat, and you guys didn't put a lot in the chat, but I want to make sure that these that these are answered. Okay, so why avoid fresh food? Because it's cooling and we want to warm you up. Also, could you show the last slide on the 3-9 days? The last slide on the 3-9 days. Let me go back. Okay, like I'll go back and look at that while I'm answering these other questions. Lastly, would be good sources to learn more in the calculations of dates. Lorraine, so it's in Lorraine's book. Like it's literally in Lorraine's book. The how I put it together though, sorry, the dog is going bonkers. How I put it together though in those calculations, that's just how my brain works, right? But that's also the calculation that is also on my website and I have it there. I'm still going back to find the 3 9s. Okay, Tom, question. Do you have a special release paperwork for this? No, because I have it included in my original paperwork. So my original release forms, I have Sanfu added in there because I do it every year. Right? There was a period of time where, I think this is what you want. There was a period of time where I did have special paperwork for it. But after I spoke with Asni and a couple people, they're like, it's in scope of practice. You don't need special release forms for it. So I don't know. I like to be like paperwork light. Okay, so fresh cooked foods, okay, but not fresh raw foods. Yes. And let me do this for you. Okay, there's a share screen of, I think that's what you need. Okay, let's see what other show chat preview. Sorry. I'm not the best at multitasking. Okay, so I think that's what you need. Is there extra language that you can share? Yes. And what I will do is is there extra language that you can share? Yes, and I will put that on the website. And could you share your slides? Absolutely not. This took me over 10 hours to put together. And on 4 gung days, do they have to get treatment on all 4 days? No. So the 4 gung days, I still only have them come in on the 3. And when they come in on the 3, they can choose like any 3 that they want to. But I find most people leave in August, and that 4th gung day is a little bit hard to get to anyways. But that's why you also have to chart to remember what day they're on, because their Sanfu day 1 might be the second Sanfu day. Does that make sense? So you have to be like really careful. Do you find that most people blister? I find it's 50-50. Really, it's 50-50, right? Most people will get red and irritated. It's very rare that I have not seen that irritation, but not everybody blisters. And I wish I could tell you that there were poker tells to look for about who will blister and who won't. But I haven't seen this poker tells because I think there's just too many factors for that. Most people blister. Okay. So if people really cannot make it to one of the gung days, can they come on a day? Yeah. I mean, it's fine. It's totally fine. So what I do on the gung days is I take my schedule and I block out like a certain time. But like if I have a regular patient and they're coming in, like if the Sanfu day is on a Friday and they're coming in on a Thursday, we'll just do it on a Thursday. You know, and then on the past too, if like a gung day is on a Saturday, I don't always want to come into the office on a Saturday, so I'll do it on a Friday. You know, it's within range. Excess formula on the slide. So there was so many slides on the excess formula. I don't know what you're looking for with that one. What do you apply in the 3-9 days? Same formula, same exact procedure, no different. Let's see what else. Miss the slides. So are you you're looking for the dosages on the excess formula? I'm assuming dosages in the excess formula if you make it yourself. Okay. By the way, like those formulas, those are just straight out of Lorraine's book. In fact, the first time I gave this lecture a number of years ago, I reached out to Lorraine. That's the cool thing I think about like our community, right? Like you can reach out to people and just be like, hey, do you have anything? And I reached out to Lorraine and I said, hey, I'm giving this like crazy lecture. Can you point me to other resources that might help me with this? And she said, oh, here's my original lecture. And she gave me like a 120-page slide lecture for her. She's just like, just attribute it to source, as long as you're attributing it to source. And I'm like, you're the queen of Moxa. Like, yes, you are. You're a source for all of this. Okay, any other, let me just catch any other things in the chat that I might have lost. Okay, I have to close that. Okay, can you do this treatment on patients who are healthy now, but as a preventative for the coming winter? Absolutely. Absolutely, right? That's what makes us so good at that. If you're good at your job, you're trying to prevent things. We're moving into preventative medicine. So the pulse and tongue might not match exactly, but you're going to lean into, are they more excess or more deficient? You're going to lean into your 8 principles to decide which formula works for them. Yeah, and Lorraine has a really good Moxibustion face group, right? Like she posts like things that are just hilarious. I follow her on Instagram because of her cat. I just watch her cat videos all day. She's amazing. Okay, Tom, do you have anything to add to this?
I think I don't have anything else to add. Anyone have the other questions? We're coming to 8:30. And if not, well, you know what? There will always be questions, but I think Heidi is very accessible. You can email her. And anyway, so on behalf of our group, thank you, Heidi, for being generous with your time and knowledge. We appreciate not only for tonight, but also the good work that you do for the profession in general. So for the group, thank you for attending tonight's event. Please make sure you check your inbox or your spam folder for your coupon from events@kamwo.com. And please make sure you check out other exciting events coming up. I will have Heidi's contact information and other continuing education opportunities. I will include that in the email with the coupon as well. So on behalf of the group, thank you so much, Heidi. Appreciate it.
You are very welcome. Very, very welcome. Thanks, guys. Good to see you.
All right, and good night.
Night.